The night we were thrown
Wow,
out, there
look
were
at
no
that
stars.
view.
I
It's
remember that
incredible.
detail
So
more than
peaceful.
anything else.
That
More than
cabin
the
looks so
cold,
cozy.
more than the
Yeah, let's go
fear,
check it out.
more than the sound of the door closing behind us like a period at the end of a sentence we never saw coming. The sky hung low and heavy over the Montana hills. Thick clouds pressed down on the earth like a hand pushing against a wound. The air smelled like rain that refused to fall, like promises that would never be kept. The porch light clicked off behind us. For a moment, we stood in complete darkness. My sister Wren's hand found mine. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly. But she did not cry. She had not cried since the funeral 6 months ago, since we lowered our mother into the frozen Montana earth and watched Gerald Hayes stand at the edge of the grave like a man waiting for a bus, like a man counting down the minutes until he could leave. I was 17 years old. My name is Cora. And everything I thought I knew about my life was about to change. Gerald Hayes had been our stepfather for 4 years. He married our mother when I was 13 and Wren was 10. We never called him Dad. He never asked us to. There was always a distance between us, a gap that neither side tried to bridge. When Mom was alive, Gerald tolerated us. We were part of the package, part of the deal he had made when he decided to marry a woman with 2 daughters and a smile that could light up any room. But Mom's smile had faded over the last year of her life. The cancer had stolen it piece by piece. First the energy behind it, then the frequency, then the smile itself replaced by a grimace of pain that she tried to hide but never quite could. And when she died, whatever thin thread had connected Gerald to us snapped completely. He waited 6 months. I will give him that much. 6 months of awkward dinners and avoided eye contact. 6 months of silence that grew heavier with each passing week. 6 months of looking at us like furniture he had inherited and did not want. Then came that night in April. He called us into the living room after dinner. His face was blank. His voice carried no emotion, no warmth, no regret, just facts delivered like a weather report. You are almost 18 anyway. That is what he said to me, his eyes never quite meeting mine. Figure it out. I stood there, processing the words, trying to make them mean something other than what they obviously meant. You are kicking us out. It was not a question. It was a statement, a confirmation of what I had suspected for months but refused to believe. Gerald shrugged, like we were discussing what to have for breakfast, like our entire lives were not crumbling around us. I need the space. His voice was flat, emotionless. You have 5 minutes to pack what you can carry, then I need you gone. 5 minutes. 5 minutes to pack 17 years of life into whatever we could carry. 5 minutes to grab photographs in clothes and memories. 5 minutes to say goodbye to the only home we had known for 4 years. Wren moved first. She ran to our shared bedroom and started pulling things from drawers, stuffing them into her school backpack. Her hands were shaking, but her face was calm. Too calm for a 14-year-old girl being thrown out of her home. I followed her, grabbed the suitcase from the closet, the old brown one that had belonged to Mom, threw in clothes, toiletries, the small jewelry box that held Mom's wedding ring from her first marriage, from before Gerald. 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute. Gerald appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, waiting. Time is up. We walked past him, through the living room, through the kitchen, out the front door, into the night. The porch light clicked off before we reached the end of the driveway. And just like that, we were homeless. The gravel crunched under our feet as we walked away from the only stability we had left. I carried the suitcase. Wren carried her backpack. Neither of us looked back. The air was cold for April. Montana springs are deceptive that way. The days might warm up, the sun might shine, but the nights still carry the memory of winter. Still hold on to the cold like a grudge they refuse to release. We walked for 10 minutes in silence, down the driveway, onto the county road, past the mailbox that still had Mom's name on it, past the fence line that marked the boundary of Gerald's property, past the edge of everything we had known. Finally, Wren spoke. Where are we going? Her voice was small, not scared exactly, more like confused, like she was still trying to understand how we had ended up here, walking down a dark road in the middle of the night with nowhere to go. I did not have an answer, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. We were not going to a shelter. We were not splitting up. We were not becoming statistics in a system that had already failed so many children like us. I reached into my jacket pocket. My fingers found the envelope. The envelope that had been pressing against my chest for 6 months. The envelope my mother had given me 3 days before she died. I remembered that moment with painful clarity. The hospital room, the machines beeping, the smell of antiseptic and death. Mom's hand reaching for mine, her fingers thin and translucent from the cancer eating her from within. She had pressed the envelope into my palm. Her grip was weak, but her eyes were intense, focused, like she was pouring everything she had left into this one moment. Do not open this unless you have no other choice. Her voice was barely a whisper, barely audible over the machines. Promise me, Cora, only when there is nowhere else to go. I had promised, and I had kept that promise through everything. Through the funeral, through the awkward months of living with Gerald, through the slow realization that he was simply waiting for an excuse to be rid of us. Now standing in the darkness with $38 in my pocket and nowhere to sleep, I finally understood what my mother had meant by no other choice. This was it. This was the moment she had been preparing me for. I pulled the envelope from my jacket. The paper was soft from being handled so many times. The edges, worn from all the nights I had held it while trying to fall asleep, wondering what was inside, wondering why Mom had been so insistent that I wait. My mother's handwriting on the front simply said, "For Cora." Ren moved closer, her eyes reflecting the dim moonlight that had begun to filter through the clouds. "What is that?" "Something Mom left me." I tore open the envelope. My fingers were shaking. From the cold, from the fear, from the weight of whatever was about to be revealed. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded twice. I unfolded it carefully, almost afraid that it might crumble to dust at my touch. There were numbers written in my mother's careful handwriting, a sequence that I recognized immediately, GPS coordinates, and beneath them a single line. "If there is nowhere else to go, find this place." Ren leaned over my shoulder, reading the words, processing them. "What does it mean?" "I do not know, but we are going to find out." We spent the first night in an unlocked tool shed behind a campground that had closed for the season. The shed smelled like gasoline and mouse droppings. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like gray curtains. The concrete floor was cold enough to steal the warmth from our bodies through our clothes, but it kept the wind off us, and that was enough. Ren curled against me, her head on my shoulder, her breathing eventually slowing into something like sleep. The backpack beneath her head served as a pillow. The jacket I draped over both of us served as a blanket. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, turning my mother's words over in my mind. If there is nowhere else to go, find this place. She had known somehow. She had known that Gerald would throw us out. She had known that we would need somewhere to go, some kind of safety net that did not involve the foster care system or the charity of strangers. But what could possibly be waiting at those coordinates? My mother had never mentioned owning property. We had never had money for that. We had always rented, always moved, always lived paycheck to paycheck in apartments and small houses that never quite felt like home. She had never mentioned anything about Montana except that she had grown up here, in a small town whose name she never spoke, a past she had run away from at 18 and never looked back. I thought about that, about my mother's silence, about the questions she always deflected, about the family history that was more blank space than story. Who was she before she became our mother? What was she running from? And why had she given me these coordinates with her dying breath? The second night we found another shed, this one attached to an abandoned farmhouse 3 miles down a logging road. The farmhouse itself was a skeleton. Fire had taken most of it decades ago. The roof was gone. The walls were charred and crumbling. But the shed had survived. A small wooden structure with a door that still closed and a floor that was wood instead of concrete. It was warmer than the first shed. Not warm exactly, but warmer. The wood did not leach the heat from our bodies quite so aggressively. And there was hay in one corner, old and dusty but soft enough to sleep on. We ate the last of the granola bars I had grabbed from the kitchen, drank water from a stream we had passed on the way, tried to pretend that this was an adventure instead of a disaster. But we both knew the truth. We could not keep doing this. The money in my pocket was disappearing faster than I had expected. $38 had become 32 after buying food at a gas station the day before, and there would be more expenses. There always were. Food was expensive. Everything was expensive when you were young and homeless and trying to survive without anyone noticing. On the third morning, I made a decision. We need to go into town. Ren looked up from the corner where she had been sitting, watching me, waiting for me to figure out what we were going to do next. She trusted me, completely, unconditionally, the way only a little sister can trust an older sibling. It was a weight I felt constantly, a responsibility I could not set down even if I wanted to. Why? There is a county courthouse. They have records there, land records. You think those coordinates lead to land. I think Mom left them for a reason. And I think it is time we found out what that reason was. The Hadley Creek County Courthouse was a two-story brick building that had probably been standing since before Montana was a state. It sat in the center of a small town that time seemed to have forgotten. Main Street had 3 traffic lights, 4 if you counted the one that had been blinking yellow for as long as anyone could remember. There was a diner, a hardware store, a grocery store that still had a hand-painted sign above the door. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where strangers stood out like ink stains on white cloth. We stood out. I could feel the eyes on us as we walked down the sidewalk. The curious glances, the whispered questions. 2 teenage girls with a suitcase and a backpack. Dirty clothes, tired eyes, obviously not from around here. But we kept walking. The courthouse smelled like old paper and older secrets when we stepped inside. The kind of place where history went to gather dust in filing cabinets, where the past was preserved in carbon copies and faded ink. The hallway was lined with bulletin boards, notices about tax auctions, surplus property sales, legal announcements that meant nothing to me. But one listing caught my eye. Parcel 17B, forest structure. Minimum bid $7. $7. I stopped. Read it again. Made sure I was not imagining things. The description was sparse. Former military storage site, no utilities, no maintained access. Structure classified as non-residential. Sold as is. There was a faded photograph attached. A concrete facade. Steel doors built into a hillside. It looked like a bunker. Something from a war movie. Something that should not exist in the modern world. My heart began to beat faster. Excuse me. The clerk behind the counter looked up. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and reading glasses perched on the bridge of her nose. Her nameplate read Nadine Pollock. Can you tell me where this property is located? She looked at the listing I was pointing to, then back at me. Her expression shifted from professional courtesy to mild surprise. That old thing, it has been on the board for years. Nobody wants it. Where is it? She typed something into her computer, squinting at the screen through her reading glasses. The keys clicked slowly, methodically, like she had all the time in the world. About 12 miles north of town, deep in the forest, no road access. You would have to hike in. Can you give me the exact coordinates? She rattled off a string of numbers. Latitude and longitude, degrees and minutes and seconds. And as she spoke them, I felt the blood drain from my face. They matched. The coordinates on the listing matched the ones my mother had written down. Exactly. Perfectly. Impossibly. Are you all right? Nadine's voice seemed to come from very far away, like she was speaking through water, through glass, through the sudden roaring in my ears. I gripped the edge of the counter, steadied myself, forced my voice to remain calm. Who owns this land? She checked her records again, scrolling through what looked like decades of property history. Her fingers moved slowly across the keyboard, each keystroke echoing in the quiet of the courthouse. Let me see. It was originally military property, transferred to the county in 1973 after the Army decommissioned the site. Then it was purchased privately in 1985. She paused, her eyebrows drawing together. Harlan Mercer. The name hit me like a physical blow. Mercer, my mother's maiden name. The name she had abandoned when she ran away from Montana and never looked back. Harlan Mercer. I repeated the name slowly, carefully, like I was tasting something I had never encountered before. Do you know what happened to him? Nadine's expression softened, the professional distance melting into something more human, more sympathetic. He passed away about 3 years ago, honey. Nice old man. Kept to himself mostly. Lived out near the edge of the county. Never married again after his wife died. She paused, studying my face, the same way you might study a puzzle that was starting to make sense. Why do you ask? I looked at Ren. She was staring at me with wide eyes, the same realization dawning on her face. I said carefully, weighing each word, he might have been our grandfather. Nadine set down her pen, leaned back in her chair, looked at us with an expression that was equal parts surprise and something else, something that might have been understanding. Your grandfather, our mother was Grace Mercer. Before she got married, before she left Montana, she never talked about her family, never mentioned anyone. We did not even know she had a father until just now. The words came out in a rush. All the questions I had never known to ask, all the blanks in our family history suddenly demanding to be filled. Nadine was quiet for a long moment, processing this information, fitting it into whatever she knew about the man named Harlan Mercer. He used to come into town sometimes, for supplies. She spoke slowly, carefully, like she was choosing each word with deliberate precision. Kept to himself mostly. But I remember he always stopped at the post office, always asked if there was any mail. And there never was. For years, there never was. She shook her head, a small sad motion. He stopped asking eventually, but I always wondered who he was waiting to hear from. I felt something tighten in my chest, a knot of emotion I could not name, grief for a man I had never met, anger at my mother for keeping him from us, confusion about why she had run so far and kept so silent. The property, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. It is for sale for $7. Nadine nodded. Like I said, it has been on the market for years. No one wants a bunker in the middle of the forest with no road access. The county has been trying to get rid of it since Harlan passed. No heirs came forward. No family claimed it. No family. Because we did not know. Because Mom never told us. Because somewhere in the silence between the woman she became and the girl she used to be, there was a story we were only now beginning to understand. We want to buy it. Nadine raised an eyebrow, both eyebrows actually, rising toward her hairline in an expression of pure disbelief. You want to buy it? Yes. You understand this is not a house, no road, no power, no plumbing. It has been sealed up for years, probably full of mold and rust and God knows what else. Yes, ma'am, she looked at me, really looked at me, not with pity, not with condescension, but with something like respect, like she was seeing something in my face that she recognized, something familiar. And you are sure, I looked at Ren, my little sister, 14 years old, homeless, orphaned, standing in a county courthouse in a town we had never heard of 3 days ago. She did not hesitate. We are sure. Nadine was quiet for another moment. Then she reached beneath the counter and pulled out a stack of forms, old forms, yellowed with age, the kind that had probably been printed decades ago and never updated. Well, she said, sliding the papers across the counter toward us. That makes it yours. Good luck. I counted out $7 from our dwindling supply. 7 crumpled bills that had been in my pocket since we left Gerald's house. $7 that represented almost a quarter of everything we had left in the world. I handed them over. Nadine stamped the transfer papers. The sound echoed through the empty courthouse like a gavel falling, like a door closing, like a new chapter beginning. She slid the papers back toward me. The property is yours now, legally and officially. Whatever is out there belongs to you. I took the papers, held them like they were made of glass, like they might shatter if I gripped too hard. $7 for a concrete structure in the woods. $7 for whatever my mother had been trying to lead us toward. $7 for a chance at something that was not sleeping in abandoned sheds and counting the days until our money ran out. We walked out of the courthouse into pale April sunlight, and for the first time in 3 days, I felt something that might have been hope. The walk took almost 3 hours. We followed the coordinates on my phone, the screen glowing faintly in the morning light, the battery draining slowly with each mile we covered. There was no road, no trail, just forest. The trees were thick here, pine and birch and spruce, their branches interlocking overhead like fingers clasped in prayer. The ground was soft with thawing mud. Patches of snow still clung to the shadows between the roots, white remnants of winter refusing to surrender to spring. We pushed through undergrowth that had not been disturbed in years, climbed over fallen logs, skirted around rocks that rose from the earth like bones. More than once we sank to our ankles in muck that tried to swallow our shoes. Cold water seeping through the seams, mud squelching with every step. But we kept walking, because somewhere ahead of us was the answer to a question my mother had planted in my mind without ever speaking it aloud. Why had she run away from Montana? What had she been running from? And what had our grandfather left behind? Wren did not complain, not once. She followed me through the forest with a determination that made me proud and broke my heart at the same time. 14 years old and already harder than she should have been, already carrying the weight that no child should have to carry. The forest began to change as we got closer to the coordinates. The trees grew thicker, older, their trunks wider than any we had seen before. Some of them had been standing here for centuries, had watched generations come and go, had kept their silence through wars and winters and all the small tragedies of human life. And then we saw it. Wren stopped breathing. I know because I stopped breathing too. The bunker rose out of the hillside like something carved from the earth itself, a concrete facade perhaps 20 feet wide, steel doors streaked with rust, half hidden by decades of moss and fallen leaves and the slow, patient work of nature reclaiming what humans had built. The roof was buried under grass that had grown thick and wild, making it almost invisible from a distance. If you did not know what you were looking for, you might walk right past it, might think it was just another hill, just another fold in the endless green of the Montana forest. Two ventilation pipes stuck up from the hill above, their caps corroded but intact. Still doing their job after all these years. Still letting air flow into the darkness below. It did not look abandoned. It looked buried, deliberately hidden from a world that had forgotten it existed. It is like a secret base. Wren's voice was barely a whisper, full of wonder, full of disbelief. She was right. It was exactly like a secret base. The entrance was chained, but the chain was old, its links weakened by decades of rust and weather. When I pulled hard enough, they gave way, falling to the ground with a clatter that echoed through the silent forest. I grabbed the door handle. The metal was cold against my palm, rough with corrosion, textured by years of exposure to the elements. Ready. Wren nodded. I pulled. The door groaned, metal scraping against metal, a sound that seemed to come from deep within the earth, from somewhere below our feet, from the darkness that had been waiting here for longer than we had been alive. Cold air breathed out from inside, not stale, not moldy, just cold, carrying the smell of concrete and time and secrets kept for decades. We stepped into the darkness. My flashlight cut through the dust. The beam illuminated a space larger than I had expected, roughly 30 feet deep and 15 feet wide. The ceiling curved above us in an arch of reinforced concrete, supported by steel ribs that had held firm for more than 50 years. The air was dry, that surprised me. Dry was good. Dry meant the structure was sound, that water had not been seeping in through cracks in the concrete, that the integrity of the bunker had been maintained through all the years of abandonment. There were old metal shelving units bolted to the walls, empty now except for a few rusted cans and some coils of wire. A desk sat in one corner, its metal surface pitted with corrosion. And further back, barely visible in the flashlight beam, I could see a second doorway. This is not just storage. I spoke more to myself than to Wren. Trying to make sense of what we were seeing, the bunker was more than I had expected, more than a simple military storage facility. There was intention here. Purpose. Someone had designed this place with something specific in mind. We walked deeper into the bunker. Our footsteps echoed off the concrete walls, making us sound larger than we were, braver than we felt. The second room was smaller, but more insulated. The walls were lined with old corkboard and wiring channels, suggesting that this had once been some kind of communication center. There were electrical panels on one wall, thick cables snaking toward a generator mount bolted to the floor. Was this some kind of command post? Wren's voice was hushed with wonder, like she was standing in a church, like she was afraid to speak too loud and disturb whatever spirits might be lingering here. I did not answer, because I did not know, but then my flashlight beam caught something on the wall. Letters carved into the concrete, deep grooves that had been cut with care and precision, not scratched or scrawled, but deliberately engraved, made to last. I stepped closer. HM 1968. The letters swam before my eyes, my heart hammering in my chest so loud I was sure Wren could hear it. HM Harlan Mercer. 1968. Almost 60 years ago. What is it? Wren was beside me now, looking at the carving, not understanding what she was seeing. These are his initials, I said, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. Our grandfather, Harlan Mercer. He did not just buy this place. The realization hit me like a wave, like cold water, like the first breath after nearly drowning. He built it. The words hung in the air between us. He built it. Our grandfather, the man we had never known existed, the man our mother had never mentioned, the man who had lived and died in Montana without ever meeting his grandchildren. He had built this place with his own hands, with his own sweat and labor in 1968, almost 60 years ago, and he had kept it all this time through decades of silence, through years of waiting, through the long, slow passage of time that separated him from the family he had lost. He had kept it for us. I do not know how long we stood there, in that concrete room, staring at those carved letters, trying to understand what they meant. The bunker felt different now. Not abandoned, not forgotten, but waiting, patient, like it had always known we would come, like our grandfather had somehow willed it into being, had poured his hope and his love into every bag of concrete, every steel beam, every bolt and wire, an inch of construction. Why did Mom never tell us? Wren's voice was small, confused, hurt. I did not have an answer, but I had questions, so many questions, about my mother and her father, about what had happened between them, about why she had run so far and kept such absolute silence about the family she had left behind. The bunker held those answers. I was sure of it, and we were going to find them. The light was fading when we finally stepped back outside. The forest had grown darker while we were underground, the shadows stretching longer, the temperature dropping as the sun began its slow descent toward the mountains. We could not stay in the bunker tonight. Not yet. It was too cold, too dark. We did not have supplies, did not have food or water or any of the things we would need to survive. But we would come back, tomorrow, with whatever we could scrounge together, with whatever tools and materials we could find, and we would start building. We slept in the farmhouse shed again that night. The hay was scratchy against our skin. The cold seeped through our clothes. Our stomachs growled with hunger that had become so familiar it almost felt normal. But something had changed. For the first time since Mom died, we had a destination, a purpose, a place that was ours. $7 and a handful of coordinates. That was all it had taken. $7 in the desperate hope that our mother had known what she was doing when she pressed that envelope into my hands. Find this place. We had found it, and whatever came next, whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Wren fell asleep with her head on my shoulder, her breathing slow and steady, the first peaceful sleep she had gotten in days. I stayed awake, watching the darkness, thinking about the bunker, about the letters carved in concrete, about the man who had built a shelter in the earth and waited decades for his grandchildren to find it. Harlan Mercer, our grandfather, a stranger who had loved us enough to leave us everything he had. The stars were visible now. The clouds had finally cleared, and through the gaps in the shed's wooden walls, I could see them scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. Mom was up there somewhere, I like to think, watching over us. I wondered if she could see what we had found, if she knew that her secret had finally been revealed, if she was proud of us for making it this far, or if she was afraid of what else we might discover. The bunker held more than concrete and steel. I was sure of that now. It held answers. It held history. It held the truth about a family we had never known we had. And tomorrow we would begin to uncover it. But tonight I let myself rest. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Tonight we were safe. Tonight we had hope. And sometimes that is enough. The first morning we woke inside the bunker, I could see my breath. It hung in the air like a ghost, like a question mark made of vapor, curling upward toward the concrete ceiling before dissolving into nothing. Wren was still asleep beside me. We had dragged pine branches inside the night before, created a barrier across the doorway to block the wind, wedged fallen timber against the entrance so it could close but not seal completely. The concrete floor was cold beneath the flattened cardboard we had found in the storage area. Old military crates, decades old, falling apart at the seams but still useful as makeshift bedding. I lay there for a long moment, watching my sister sleep, watching her chest rise and fall with each breath. Her face was peaceful in a way I had not seen since before Mom got sick. She trusted me. That thought landed heavy in my chest, a weight I could not put down, a responsibility I had not asked for but could not refuse. 17 years old, responsible for a 14-year-old sister, living in a bunker in the middle of the Montana wilderness, with $24 left to our names. I got up quietly, careful not to wake her, stepped over the pine branch barrier and pushed open the heavy steel door. The morning air hit me like a slap, cold and clean and smelling of pine. The sun was just starting to filter through the trees, casting long shadows across the hillside, turning the dew on the grass into diamonds. It was beautiful, and it was terrifying, because beauty would not keep us warm. Beauty would not fill our stomachs. Beauty would not protect us when winter came howling down from the mountains. I needed a plan. I sat down on a fallen log near the bunker entrance and pulled out the small notebook I had grabbed from Gerald's house. Started making a list. Light. We needed light. The bunker was dark. Too dark to work in. Too dark to live in. Heat. The concrete held the cold like a grudge. Without some source of warmth, we would freeze when the temperature dropped. Water. There was a stream about half a mile away. But carrying water that distance every day would exhaust us. We needed something closer, something more reliable. Food. Our money was almost gone. We would need to find ways to extend it, to make every dollar count. The list grew longer, each item spawning 3 more, each solution creating new problems. But that was okay. Problems could be solved, one at a time, step by step, the way my grandfather had built this bunker. One bag of concrete at a time, one steel beam at a time, one day at a time. If he could do it, so could we. The decision to sell Mom's watch came 3 days later. I had been putting it off, telling myself we would find another way, that I would not have to give up the one physical object that still connected me to her. But reality does not care about sentiment. Reality cares about survival. The watch was simple, silver with a leather band. Nothing expensive, nothing flashy, but she had worn it every day for as long as I could remember, had checked the time on it 1,000 times, had fastened it around her wrist each morning as part of her daily ritual. She had given it to me on my 16th birthday, pressing it into my hands with that same careful intensity she had used when giving me the envelope. "This is yours now," she had said. "When you look at it, remember that time is a gift. Do not waste a single second." I had worn it every day since. Through the last year of her illness, through the funeral, through the months of living with Gerald and pretending everything was fine. Now I held it in my palm, feeling its weight, watching the morning light play across its surface. Wren found me sitting outside the bunker, staring at the watch like it might speak to me if I waited long enough. "You do not have to." Her voice was quiet, understanding. "Yes, I do. We could find another way. There is no other way." I looked at my sister, at her thin face and serious eyes, at the way she had aged 10 years in the past 6 months. "We need light. We need tools. We need supplies. And this is the only thing of value we have left." Wren was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and took my hand, squeezed it once. She would want us to survive, I know. She would want us to use whatever we had. I know. She would be proud of you, Cora. I closed my fingers around the watch one last time, feeling the worn leather, the cool metal, the faint tick of the mechanism that had kept perfect time through everything. Then I put it in my pocket and stood up. "Let us go to town." The pawn shop in Hadley Creek was a narrow building squeezed between the hardware store and an empty storefront with soaked windows. The owner was a heavy-set man with suspicious eyes and a beard that had not been trimmed in months. He looked at us like we were there to rob him. Like two teenage girls were the most dangerous threat he had faced all week. He offered $30. I said no. He offered 35. I said no. He studied the watch more carefully, held it up to the light, checked the mechanism, weighed it in his palm like he was measuring its worth in grams rather than dollars. 40. I said no. The silence stretched between us. He wanted the watch. I could see it in his eyes. He knew it was worth more than he was offering. Knew he could turn a profit if I was desperate enough to accept. I was desperate, but I was not stupid. 45. Final offer. I took it. The bills felt wrong in my hand, too light for what they represented, too thin to contain the weight of what I had just given up. But I walked out of that pawn shop with $45, walked across the street to the hardware store, bought two battery-powered lanterns, a small solar panel kit, extension wiring, a deep cycle battery that the mechanic at the garage sold me for $10 because it had a dent in the casing. We carried everything back to the bunker. 3 hours of walking with supplies strapped to our backs, arms aching, legs burning, but moving forward, always forward. I mounted the solar panel on the hillside above the bunker, angled it toward a clearing where the trees thinned enough to let sunlight through, ran the wiring down one of the old ventilation shafts, connected it to the battery, connected the battery to the lanterns. By nightfall, the bunker glowed. It was not much. The light was weak, casting shadows that made the concrete walls look like the inside of a cave. But it was light, our light, created by our hands from materials we had earned. Wren stood in the center of the room, her face illuminated by the soft glow, turning slowly, taking it all in. "It is like we are astronauts," she said, "living on some distant planet. Better than astronauts," I replied. "At least we can breathe the air." She laughed, actually laughed, the first real laugh I had heard from her in months. And in that moment, standing in our underground home with electric light, we had created ourselves, and I felt something shift inside me. We were going to make it. Whatever came next, we were going to make it. Heat came next. The bunker stayed cool even in the afternoon warmth. The concrete held on to the cold from the night before, released it slowly throughout the day, creating a chill that seeped into your bones if you sat still for too long. It was manageable now, in late April with spring slowly warming the earth. But I knew what Montana winters were like. Everyone knew. The stories were part of the local mythology. Temperatures dropping to 20 below, 30 below. Wind chills that could freeze exposed skin in minutes. If we were going to survive the winter, we needed heat. Real heat. Sustained heat. The kind of heat that would push back against the cold and win. 3 miles from our bunker, down a trail I had discovered during one of my supply runs, stood the ruins of an old farmhouse. Fire had taken most of it decades ago. The roof was gone. The walls were charred skeletons. The floors had collapsed into the basement, creating a jumbled mess of blackened timber and twisted metal. But the chimney still stood, rising from the ruins like a monument to something that used to be. And scattered around its base were the remains of a cast-iron wood stove. It was old, heavy, rusted in places, but still solid. The kind of stove that had heated farmhouses for generations. The kind that would last another 100 years if you took care of it. Getting it back to the bunker nearly killed me. The stove weighed close to 200 pounds, maybe more. I could not lift it, could barely move it. Certainly could not carry it 3 miles through rough terrain. So I built a sled, fallen branches lashed together with rope I had bought in town. A flat platform of salvaged wood, just sturdy enough to hold the weight, just smooth enough to slide across the forest floor. It took 3 trips. 3 trips of dragging that impossible weight through the woods, around rocks, over roots, through patches of mud that tried to swallow the sled whole. My arms screamed, my back howled, my hands blistered and bled and blistered again. But I got it there, piece by piece, day by day. I got it there. Wren helped where she could, clearing the path ahead of me, pushing from behind when the sled got stuck, bringing water from the stream when I was too exhausted to move. We worked in silence mostly. Words were wasted energy, and we had none to spare. The stove sat in the back room of the bunker for 2 days while I figured out the ventilation. The original ventilation system was still intact. Pipes running up through the hillside, caps that let air in and out. But they were not designed for a wood stove, were not built to handle smoke and heat and the constant draw of a fire. I modified them, cut holes in the ductwork with a hacksaw I had bought at the hardware store, fitted sheet metal I had scavenged from an abandoned shed, created a path for the smoke to follow from the stove to the outside air. It was crude, imperfect, the kind of solution that would make a professional HVAC installer weep, but it was functional. On the evening of our second week in the bunker, I lit the first fire. The smoke did not go up. The smoke went everywhere. Within seconds, the room was filled with a gray haze that made our eyes water and our lungs burn. I scrambled to open the door, to get fresh air flowing, to clear the toxic cloud before it killed us both. Wren stood outside coughing, tears streaming down her face, looking at me with an expression that was equal parts frustration and something else. Not disappointment, determination. Try again. I went back inside, examined the stove, the pipes, the connections, found where the draft was failing, where the smoke was getting trapped instead of rising. Made adjustments, sealed gaps, changed the angle of the exhaust pipe by 3 degrees. Tried again. The smoke rose, slow at first, hesitant, like it was testing the path I had created, making sure it was safe before committing. Then faster, more confident, a steady stream of gray flowing up through the pipes and out into the Montana air. And the heat spread through the room like something alive, radiating from the cast iron, pushing back the cold that had lived in the concrete for decades, warming the air, warming the walls, warming something deep inside me that I had not realized was frozen. Wren came back inside, stood near the stove, held her hands out toward the warmth. We did it. Her voice was wonder and exhaustion and triumph all mixed together. Yeah, I said, we did. The bunker was no longer a concrete tomb. It was starting to feel like a home. He appeared without warning. One morning about 3 weeks after we had moved in, I was on the hillside above the bunker, clearing brush from around the solar panel, trying to maximize the light it received during the day. I heard the footsteps before I saw him, crunching through the undergrowth with a confidence that suggested he knew these woods better than I ever would. When I turned, there was a man standing at the edge of the clearing, mid-50s, maybe older, weather-beaten face, eyes that had seen more Montana winters than I could count. He wore a camouflage jacket that had faded from years of use. A rifle hung over one shoulder. Not threatening, just present, the way a tool might be present. He looked at me, at the solar panel, at the bunker entrance visible below. You the girls camping in Mercer's old place. It was not really a question. We own it now. He made a sound that might have been acknowledgement, might have been skepticism. His name was Bowen Tate. I learned that later. The closest thing Hadley Creek had to a local legend. He had been hunting these woods since before I was born, knew every trail, every stream, every hiding place within 50 miles, planning to live in a hole in the ground. It is not a hole, it is reinforced concrete. He almost smiled. Almost. The corner of his mouth twitching upward for just a moment before settling back into its weathered neutrality. Winter will teach you otherwise. Then he turned and walked back into the forest, disappearing among the trees like he had never been there at all. The words stayed with me, though. Winter will teach you otherwise. Not a threat, a warning. From a man who knew these mountains, who had survived decades of winters that had broken stronger people than us. He thought we would fail. He thought we would run when the snow came, when the temperature dropped, when the reality of what we had chosen became impossible to ignore. Maybe he was right. Maybe we would fail, but we were not going to fail for lack of trying. The whispers reached my ears about a month after we arrived. I was in the grocery store in Hadley Creek, buying rice and beans and dried lentils, things that would last, things that would stretch our remaining money as far as possible. 2 women were talking in the next aisle, their voices carrying over the shelves in that way people have when they think they are being quiet but are not. You hear about those girls living out in the woods. In that old bunker, the Mercer place, living like moles, Can you imagine in a hole in the ground? Their laughter was sharp, cutting, the kind of laughter that is designed to hurt even when it pretends to be harmless. I stood very still, my hands gripping the bag of rice so tight my knuckles went white. Will not last the winter. You watch. They will come crawling back to town before the first snow falls. More laughter. I wanted to say something, wanted to walk around the aisle and tell them exactly what we were building, what we were surviving, what we were capable of. But I did not. I finished my shopping, paid for my groceries, walked out of the store with my spine straight and my head high. Their laughter followed me out the door. That night I told Wren what I had heard. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the fire, the flames reflecting in her eyes. Does it bother you? No, liar. I almost smiled. It motivates me. Every time someone laughs at us, every time someone says we cannot do this, it makes me more determined to prove them wrong. Wren nodded slowly. Good, because we are going to need that determination. She was right. Summer was ending, fall was coming, and beyond fall waited a Montana winter that could kill the unprepared. The discovery happened by accident. I had been studying the bunker's construction for weeks, trying to understand how it had survived 50 years without maintenance, learning from the techniques my grandfather had used so I could apply them to our own improvements. The concrete shell was impressive, poured in a single arch at least 10 inches thick, reinforced with steel mesh that had barely begun to rust. Whoever had designed this place knew exactly what they were doing. But the back wall was different. Not poured concrete, reinforced block, backed directly against packed soil. It was solid enough, stable enough, but it was not part of the original design, which meant there might be more space behind it. Space we could claim. You want to dig a tunnel? Wren's voice was incredulous. We were standing in the back room of the bunker, looking at the wall that separated us from whatever lay beyond. Not a tunnel, an extension, another room, underground, underground. She was silent for a long moment, processing the idea, weighing the work against the reward. Then she grinned. When do we start? We started by removing the back wall one block at a time. The work was slow, methodical. Each block had to be chipped free carefully, stacked neatly, saved for later use. Behind the blocks was dense clay soil. I had been hoping for clay. Clay held its shape, did not crumble like sand or shift like gravel. Clay was stable, predictable, workable. We dug in shifts, 2 hours digging, 1 hour reinforcing. For every foot we carved out, we had to brace the walls and ceiling with timber. I salvaged the wood from an abandoned barn along the logging trail, cut the beams with a handsaw, shaped them with a hatchet, treated them with wood sealant I bought in town. Every piece had to be perfect. Underground, there was no margin for error. The work was exhausting. By the end of each day, my arms felt like they were filled with sand. My back screamed with every movement. My hands were covered in blisters that kept breaking open and healing over. Breaking and healing, breaking and healing. But inch by inch, the extension grew. Wren helped where she could, hauling buckets of soil up the ladder and outside, sorting through the clay for rocks that might cause problems later, bringing food and water when I forgot to eat. 14 years old and working harder than most adults I had ever known. I was proud of her, more than proud. I was in awe of her. 6 weeks passed, 6 weeks of digging and bracing and reinforcing, 6 weeks of exhaustion and frustration and small victories that kept us going when everything else said we should stop. And at the end of those 6 weeks, we had a new room, 12 feet by 10 feet, not large by normal standards, but standing in a space that had not existed 2 months earlier, a space we had carved out of the earth with our own hands. It felt like standing in a cathedral. We did this. Wren's voice was soft, odd, her fingers running along the timber braces like she still could not quite believe they were real. It is not done yet. We still need to finish the walls, add ventilation, make it livable. I know, but still. She turned to look at me, her eyes shining in the dim light from the lantern. We built a room, Cora, out of nothing but dirt and wood and stubbornness. I smiled despite my exhaustion. We are pretty good at stubbornness. On a Thursday afternoon in late September, my shovel hit something solid, not rock. The sound was wrong for rock. This was hollow, metallic. I knelt in the dirt and brushed away the soil with my hands. A corner emerged, metal, rusted but intact. Wren. She descended the ladder quickly, drawn by something in my voice. When she saw what I had uncovered, she dropped to her knees beside me. Together we dug the box free. It was about the size of a small suitcase. Heavy gauge steel, sealed with a latch that had rusted shut but still held. The plastic wrapping around it had kept it dry for decades, protected it from the moisture in the soil, preserved whatever was inside. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I worked the latch open with my knife, rust flakes falling away like dried blood. Inside, wrapped in more plastic, were papers, photographs, letters. I picked up the first photograph with trembling hands. A young woman stood in front of a small house, smiling at the camera. She wore a simple dress. Her hair was pulled back from her face. She could not have been more than 20 years old. But I knew that face. I had seen it in mirrors my entire life, had seen it wasting away on a hospital bed, fighting a battle it could not win. My mother, decades before I was born, standing in a Montana she had never told us about. Among the photographs we found letters, dozens of them, all addressed to us, to Cora and Wren Mercer, written in a neat, careful hand that I recognized from the initials carved into the bunker wall. Our grandfather, writing to grandchildren he had never met. The first letter was dated 1998. Wren had not even been conceived yet. I was barely 3 years old. My dearest granddaughters. The words swam before my eyes. I do not know when you will read this, or if you ever will. Your mother has taken you away to a place I cannot reach. She will not answer my letters. She will not take my calls. I do not know what I did to make her hate me so much, but I know that my heart breaks a little more each day, knowing that you are growing up without me. I read the letter aloud to Wren, my voice cracking on every other sentence, the words blurring through tears I could not control. There were more letters, so many more, each one dated, each one addressed to us, each one sealed in an envelope that had never been opened. Because they had never been sent, because our mother had run so far and hidden so well that our grandfather could never find us. I tried to mail this to you today. One letter read, but it came back, address unknown. Your mother has moved again. I do not know where you are. I do not know if you are safe. I do not know if you even know I exist. Another letter from 2001. Happy birthday, Cora. You are 6 years old today. I wish I could be there to give you a present. Instead, I am writing this letter that will probably never reach you, adding it to the pile of letters in this box that grows larger every year. I do not know why I keep writing. Maybe because it is the only way I have left to feel close to you. And another from 2005. Wren must be 7 now. I wonder what she looks like. I wonder if she has her mother's eyes or her grandmother's hair. I wonder if she knows how much she is loved by an old man in Montana who has never seen her face. The letters continued, year after year, birthday wishes for birthdays he never witnessed, holiday greetings for holidays he never shared, simple notes written on ordinary days when he was thinking of us, missing us, loving us from a distance he could not bridge. There was a letter that explained everything, dated 1988, the year our mother left Montana. If you are reading this, you have found my bunker. And that means I am probably gone. So let me tell you the story your mother would never tell. I built this place in 1968. It was a government project, Cold War bunker. I was young and strong, and I believed that building something solid could protect the people I loved from anything. Your grandmother was sick that year. Nothing serious, we thought. Just tired, just weak. But it got worse while I was working, and I did not see it. I was too focused on the bunker, too focused on construction, too focused on a future threat instead of the present danger. She died in the spring of 1968, while I was pouring concrete underground, learning too late that the things that destroy us rarely come from outside. Your mother blamed me. She was 18, grieving, angry. She said I had chosen concrete over her mother, had chosen work over family, had chosen a bunker over a bedside. She was right, and she was wrong. But it did not matter because she left that summer, and I never saw her again. I tried to find her for years, decades, hired investigators, wrote letters to every address they found, But she kept moving, kept running, kept hiding from a past she could not forgive. So I kept building. I added rooms to the bunker, dug the well deeper, reinforced the walls, told myself that someday, somehow, you would find your way here, that this place would shelter you the way I could never shelter you myself. I sat on the dirt floor of the extension we had built, holding letters our grandfather had written to us over 22 years, crying for a man I had never met. He never stopped. Ren's voice was barely a whisper. All those years, he never stopped trying to find us. No, I managed to say the word through the tightness in my throat. He never stopped. We cried together, in the half-finished extension of the bunker our grandfather had built, holding letters he had written to grandchildren he had never held. We cried for him, for his decades of loneliness and hope, for his letters that were never sent and his love that was never received. We cried for our mother, for the grief that had driven her to run, for the anger she could not release, for the secret she had kept until her dying breath. We cried for ourselves, for all the years we could have had with family, all the birthdays and holidays and ordinary days that had been stolen by silence. And when the tears finally stopped, I looked at the walls around us, at the timber braces our grandfather had taught us to build without ever knowing he was teaching us, at the structure that had survived 50 years because someone had loved us enough to make it strong. "We are finishing what he started," I said. Ren nodded, her face streaked with tears but her eyes clear. For him, and for us. The hatch in the floor revealed itself 3 days later. I had been reinforcing the wall of the main bunker when I noticed the seam. A line in the concrete that did not match the rest of the floor. Too straight, too deliberate. I cleared the debris that had accumulated over decades, swept away dust and dirt until the outline of a hatch became clear. My heart began to pound. A handle, pitted with age but still functional. I knelt and pulled. The hatch groaned open, revealing a ladder descending into darkness below. Ren came to stand beside me. "Please tell me we are not going down there." I grabbed the flashlight. "We are going down there." The lower level was compact but intact. Concrete walls, reinforced ceiling, a narrow hallway that split into two small rooms. One room was clearly storage, empty shelves lining the walls, space for supplies that had never been needed. The other room contained something that made my heart stop. A manual water pump, bolted directly into the bedrock. I approached it slowly, almost afraid to believe what I was seeing. The handle was stiff with disuse, corroded at the joints, but when I pushed down on it, it moved. Resistance at first, then smoother, then water. Clear, cold, steady, flowing up from somewhere deep below, from an underground aquifer that had been waiting for us all along. Ren gasped, "You are kidding." I was not kidding. The bunker had its own well. Our grandfather had planned for everything, had thought of every contingency, had built a structure that could sustain life even when the world above failed. But there was more. Behind the water pump, partially hidden by the bulk of the machinery, another wall, another seal, another secret. The wall came down easily. It was not meant to be permanent, just a barrier, a separation between the main bunker and whatever lay beyond. The room behind it was small, maybe 8 feet by 6 feet, but what it contained made everything else seem insignificant. A radio transmitter, military surplus from the look of it, dials frozen in place, cables running to an antenna array that must have extended up through the hillside, a logbook filled with frequencies and call signs, notes about maintenance and testing, evidence that this equipment had been operational for decades, and taped to the transmitter a final letter. This one was different from the others. It was not addressed to us. It was not addressed to anyone. It was simply a statement, a final message from a man who had spent his life building and waiting and hoping. "If someone finds this room, know that I built it as a last resort, a way to call for help if help was ever needed. I never had to use it, but I wanted it to be here, just in case. This bunker was built for protection, not to hide from the world, but to shelter those I love from it. If you are reading this, then you have found what I left behind. Use it well. Give it to help others. That is what it was always meant for. With all my love, your grandfather, Harlan Mercer." I traced my grandfather's signature with my fingertip. He had thought of everything. even a way to reach the outside world if everything else failed, even a purpose beyond our own survival. He really did plan for us. Ren's voice was soft, wonder and grief mixed together. He planned for everyone. I replied, he just did not know who would need it most. We climbed back up the ladder as the evening light began to fade. The bunker looked different now. Not just a shelter, not just a hiding place, a legacy, built with love by a man who never stopped believing that his family would find their way home. We had found it, and we were going to honor it. Whatever came next, whatever challenges the winter brought, whatever the people in town said about us, we would survive. We would build. We would make our grandfather proud. October brought the first frost. I woke one morning to find the world transformed. Every blade of grass, every leaf, every branch, coated in delicate white crystals that caught the early light and turned the forest into something magical. The sun rose through the trees and set the frost on fire. Thousands of tiny diamonds sparkling across the hillside. The kind of beauty that makes you forget to breathe, that makes you stand perfectly still because any movement might shatter the spell. But I could not afford to stand still because the frost was not just beautiful, it was a warning. Winter was coming. And winter in Montana does not negotiate, does not compromise, does not care about your plans or your hopes or your desperate determination to survive. Winter simply arrives, and you are either ready for it or you are not. We worked faster after that first frost. The extension was finished by mid-October, lined with salvaged corkboard for insulation, fitted with a small wood stove we found at a yard sale in town for $12. The ventilation system now served 3 rooms instead of 1, modified with PVC piping and a manual crank fan that kept air flowing through the entire structure. We built storage shelves into the walls, filled them with everything we could afford. Canned goods from discount racks, dented cans that the grocery store sold for half price, rice and beans and lentils in bulk, sealed in plastic buckets to keep out moisture and mice, dehydrated vegetables, sugar, salt, coffee, the basics of survival when the snow piled too deep to reach town. We built a root cellar in the coldest corner of the lower level, used sand insulation to keep potatoes and carrots and onions fresh for months. The earth temperature stayed constant underground, around 50 degrees year-round, perfect for preservation. We cut firewood until our hands bled, then healed, then bled again, stacked it in rows along the wall of the main room, leaving space for air to circulate, building up reserves that we hoped would last until spring. Every swing of the axe was a prayer. Every log we split was a promise. We would survive this winter. We would prove everyone wrong. Bowen Tate appeared again in late October. He emerged from the forest like a ghost materializing from mist. One moment the trees were empty. The next moment he was standing at the edge of our clearing, watching us with those weathered eyes that seemed to see everything. Still here. His voice was gruff, neutral, neither approval nor criticism. Still here. I was stacking firewood, my arms aching from the weight, my back screaming with every movement, but I did not stop, did not slow down, would not give him the satisfaction of seeing how tired I was. He walked a slow circuit around our little homestead, taking in the improvements we had made, the cleared pathways, the expanded ventilation, the neat stacks of firewood, the solar panel angled toward the winter sun. I could not tell if he was impressed or calculating how long until we failed. Winter is coming early this year. He stopped near the bunker entrance, his eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the trees. Already had 3 inches in the high country. Old-timers are saying it will be bad. We are ready. He made a sound that might have been agreement, might have been skepticism. Maybe, maybe not. He turned to face me directly, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. You know, most people who try to live off-grid out here do not last their first winter. They underestimate the cold, underestimate the isolation, underestimate how hard it is to survive when the snow gets deep and the thermometer drops below 0 and there is nothing between you and death except your own preparation. We are not most people. No, he admitted slowly, his voice carrying something that might have been respect. I do not suppose you are. He started to walk away. then paused, turned back. There is a storm system forming over the Pacific. Weather Service is tracking it. Probably hit in 6 to 8 weeks, if it hits. Thanks for the warning. He shrugged, just being neighborly, and then he was gone, swallowed by the forest as silently as he had appeared. 6 to 8 weeks. That was what Bowen had said. 6 to 8 weeks until the storm that might change everything. The days grew shorter. The nights grew longer. The temperature dropped degree by degree. The forest around us began to prepare for winter in its own ancient way. The birds left first, flying south in formations that wrote messages across the sky, messages we could not read but understood anyway. Change is coming. The squirrels worked frantically, gathering nuts and seeds, burying them in hidden caches throughout the forest, their tiny bodies never still, never resting, driven by instincts that had kept their ancestors alive for thousands of years. The deer grew thicker coats, their summer brown deepening into winter gray. We saw them sometimes at dawn, moving through the trees like ghosts, stopping to watch us with dark eyes that held no fear, only curiosity. And the trees themselves began to change, the leaves turning gold and red and orange, then falling, carpeting the forest floor with color before fading to brown. November arrived, then December. The first real snow fell on the 3rd of the month, 6 inches overnight, transforming our world into something new, something white and silent and beautiful. Wren stood at the bunker entrance that morning, watching the snow fall, her breath forming clouds that hung in the still air. It is really happening. Her voice was quiet, not scared exactly, but aware of what was coming, of what we would face. Yeah, I came to stand beside her. It is really happening, but we are ready. I hope that was true. The storm hit in mid-December. It did not arrive gently. It slammed into Montana like a fist, like the fury of something ancient and unstoppable, driving snow horizontally across the mountains, burying roads and trails beneath drifts that grew deeper by the hour. The wind screamed through the trees, not howled, screamed, a sound like something alive and angry and hungry, snapping branches, toppling weakened trunks, reshaping the landscape with casual violence. We watched it arrive through the small window I had installed near the bunker entrance, bulletproof glass salvaged from an old bank that was being demolished in town. The glass was thick enough to withstand small arms fire. It turned out to be thick enough to withstand a Montana blizzard. The temperature dropped like a stone falling into a well. 10 degrees, 0, -10, -20. The cold was so intense that exposed skin would freeze within minutes. The kind of cold that hunts you, that finds every gap in your clothing, every weakness in your shelter, every vulnerability in your preparation. Inside the bunker, we closed the heavy entrance door fully for the first time since we had arrived. Wren watched me seal the gaps with foam strips, her expression worried but determined. We are really doing this. We are really doing this. What if something goes wrong? I turned to face her. My sister, who had followed me into this wilderness without complaint, who had worked beside me day after day, building a life from nothing but determination and love. Then we figure it out, together, like we always do. Day 1 of the storm, the wind howled outside, but inside the bunker we barely heard it. The earth absorbed the sound, muffled it, turned it into a distant rumbling that might have been thunder or might have been imagination. The wood stove burned steadily, flames dancing behind the iron grate, heat radiating through the room in waves. The ventilation system hummed as the crank fan pushed fresh air through the rooms. We took turns operating it, 30 minutes on, 30 minutes off, keeping the air moving, keeping us alive. The temperature inside held at 58 degrees, not warm by normal standards, but livable, comfortable even, compared to the death that waited outside. We read books by lantern light, old paperbacks we had found in a donation bin at the library in town, mystery novels and westerns, and romance stories that seemed absurd given our circumstances. We played cards, rummy and poker, and games we invented ourselves to pass the time. We talked about the future, about what we would do when spring came, about the garden we would plant, the improvements we would make, the life we would build. And we listened to the storm rage. knowing we were safe. Day 3. The power grid failed sometime during the night. We knew because the emergency radio we had found in our grandfather's belongings crackled with static, then began picking up broadcasts from Hadley Creek. Entire county without power. Crews unable to reach damaged lines. Residents advised to shelter in place. The voice was calm. Voice, professional, trying not to cause panic. But I could hear the fear beneath the words. This was not a normal storm. This was something else. Ren looked at me in the dim light of our lanterns. The town. They do not have what we have. No, I agreed, they do not. Day 6, the pounding on our entrance came just after noon. I approached cautiously, one hand on the door handle, the other on the knife I kept at my belt. Who is there? It is Tate. The voice was muffled, weakened by cold, but recognizable. Bowen Tate. I opened the door. He stood in the snow, his camouflage jacket covered in white, his face red with windburn, ice crystals clinging to his beard. Behind him were two elderly people, a man and a woman, bundled in every piece of clothing they owned and still shivering. Their lips were blue, their hands trembled. Their eyes held the look of people who had seen death approaching and barely escaped. Community center is gone. Bowen's voice was hoarse, raw from the cold. Pipes burst. No heat. People are dying out there. He looked at me, at the warmth visible behind me, at the shelter we had built. The bunker. Does it have room? I looked at the two elderly people, at their blue lips and trembling hands, at the frost forming on their eyelashes. The words came before I could think them. Bring them in. We established a system. The bunker could hold 4 or 5 people comfortably for several hours at a time. More than that, and the air grew stale. The heat dissipated. The resources stretched too thin. So we created rotations. Warm up, recharge any medical devices, fill water containers from the pump, eat something warm, then return home. Make room for the next group. It was not perfect. Nothing about the situation was perfect. But it worked. Ren took charge of logistics. She maintained a list of who had come, when they had arrived, what they needed. She tracked our food supplies, our fuel reserves, our water usage. At 14 years old, my sister became the operations manager of our underground refugee center. I managed the technical side, the stove, the ventilation, the generator I had bought in late summer and mounted in an insulated shed above ground, connected to the bunker by buried cables. Every time the fuel ran low, I had to venture outside, into the killing cold, through snow that was now waist deep, to refill the tank and keep everything running. Day 7, day 8, day 9. The snow kept falling, the wind kept howling, and people kept coming to our door. The woman from the grocery store, the one who had counted our change with extra care, who had looked at us with neither pity nor judgment, just kindness. She came on day 7, her husband helping her through the drifts, grateful tears freezing on her cheeks when she felt the warmth inside. The man from the hardware store, the one who had asked too many questions about what we were building, who had sold us supplies without comment, who had watched us with curiosity but never condemnation. He came on day 8, alone. His house had lost its roof to the wind. He had walked 4 miles through the storm to reach us. And the voices I had overheard at the feed store, the ones who had laughed about girls living like moles, they came too. Day 9, day 10, one by one, group by group. They stood at our door, snow-covered and shivering, eyes that would not meet ours, voices that stumbled over words that might have been apologies. None of them laughed now. Day 11, there was a line outside the bunker. Not long, maybe 10 or 12 people, but a line nonetheless. They stood in the snow, bundled in whatever warmth they could find, waiting for their turn to descend into the earth and feel heat on their faces. I moved down the line, checking on people, making sure no one was showing signs of severe frostbite or hypothermia. Most were handling the weight well enough. They had learned to dress in layers, to keep moving, to help each other. Then I reached the end of the line, and I saw him, Gerald Hayes, our stepfather, the man who had thrown us out into the night with nothing but a suitcase and $38. The man who had looked at us like unwanted furniture and decided we were not worth the space we occupied. He was thinner than I remembered, older. The cold had carved new lines into his face. His eyes had lost some of the hardness I had always seen in them. He saw me at the same moment I saw him, and he froze. We stood there in the snow, the wind whipping between us, neither of us speaking. I felt Wren come up beside me, felt her presence like warmth against my side, felt her hand find mine the way it had on that dark night 8 months ago. Gerald's mouth opened, closed, opened again. He started, stopped, tried again. I did not know. The words hung in the frozen air between us. Did not know what. That the storm would be this bad. That the bunker existed. That 2 teenage girls he had discarded would be the ones standing between him and freezing to death. I looked at this man who had caused us so much pain. This man who had decided that 2 orphan girls were not his problem. This man who stood before me, now shivering in the cold, waiting for shelter from the people he had thrown away. I could have turned him away. It would have been easy. A single word, a shake of my head, a closed door. It would have been satisfying. After everything he had done, after the fear and the hunger and the nights sleeping on concrete floors, it would have been justice of a kind. Served cold in a blizzard that seemed designed for exactly that kind of irony. But I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw something I had not expected. I saw a man who was afraid, a man who had made terrible choices and was only now beginning to understand the weight of them. A man who might not deserve forgiveness, but who deserved the same basic mercy I would extend to any human being in danger. My grandfather had built this bunker to shelter the people he loved, but he had also built it to protect, to serve, to provide safety when the world offered none. I thought about the letters we had found, about his final words taped to that radio transmitter. Use it to help others. That is what it was always meant for. He had not built it just for us. He had built it for whoever needed it. The silence stretched between us. Gerald shivering, waiting, not begging, but close to it. Wren's hand tightened in mine. The wind screamed across the hillside, driving snow into our faces, stealing the warmth from our bodies. And I made my choice. Come in. My voice was steady, calm, carrying no anger, no satisfaction, no triumph, just simple truth. Everyone is welcome here. Gerald stepped past me into the warmth of the bunker. He did not say anything, did not try to explain or justify or apologize. Just moved to a corner near the stove and sat down. His hands extended toward the heat, his eyes fixed on the flames. Wren watched him with an expression I could not read. She did not approach him, did not speak to him, but she did not protest either. Some wounds take longer to heal than others. Some might never heal at all, but that did not mean we had to add to them. An hour later, Gerald's rotation was ending. He stood slowly, his joints stiff from the cold that had seeped into them during his walk to the bunker. He moved toward the door, toward the snow and wind waiting outside. Then he stopped, turned back. Your mother, his voice was rough, raw, like he had not spoken in a very long time. She always said you were strong, like your grandfather. I did not respond, did not know how to respond. Gerald pulled his inadequate jacket tighter around his shoulders. I did not understand what she meant. He looked at the bunker, at the concrete walls, at the stove and the ventilation and the evidence of everything we had built, until now. He opened the door, let in a blast of frozen air. For what it is worth. I am sorry. His voice was barely a whisper. I know it does not fix anything, but I am sorry. Then he was gone. Swallowed by the snow like everyone else who passed through our door, I stood there for a long moment, processing what had just happened. Gerald Hayes had apologized. It did not fix anything. He was right about that. Words could not undo what he had done, could not give us back those first terrifying nights, could not erase the hunger and fear and desperation. But it was something, a small acknowledgement that what he had done was wrong, a tiny step towards something that might someday look like healing. Wren came to stand beside me. She did not say anything. She did not have to. We stood together in the warmth of our grandfather's bunker, and we let the moment pass. Day 18. An old man came through the line, very old, well into his 80s, with hands that shook from more than just the cold. He walked with a cane, each step careful and deliberate, measured and slow. and he looked at the bunker entrance with an expression I could not quite read. Recognition, wonder, and something else, something deeper. I helped build this place. His voice was thin but clear. Summer of 1968, I was the foreman on the project. I stared at him. You knew my grandfather, the old man smiled. And despite his age, despite the cold, despite everything, the smile was warm. Harlan Mercer, best worker I ever had, young but dedicated, never cut corners, never complained. He was supposed to be just a laborer, but by the end of the project, he was practically running the crew. Come inside, I said, please. His name was Virgil Sinclair, 82 years old. He had lived in Hadley Creek his entire life, had watched it change from a logging town to a retirement community to something in between. And he had been there when my grandfather first set foot in the bunker that would eventually become our home. We sat near the stove, the fire crackling, the warmth wrapping around us like a blanket. The military abandoned this site in 1973. Virgil spoke slowly, carefully, like he was choosing each word from a lifetime of memories. Something about budget cuts. The county took it over, but nobody wanted it. Too remote, too expensive to maintain. They were going to seal it permanently, but they did not. No, Virgil shook his head. Your grandfather bought it. Paid cash, if I remember right. Took him years to save up that much. But he did it. Said he had a feeling he might need a place like this someday. Did he ever tell you what for? Virgil's eyes grew distant, looking at something only he could see. He talked about family, about a daughter who had run away, about grandchildren he had never met. He said that someday, somehow, they would find their way back to Montana. And when they did, he wanted there to be something waiting for them, and something solid, something safe. I felt tears threatening. But I held them back. He never stopped believing we would come. No, Virgil agreed, he never did. He looked around at the bunker, at the improvements we had made, at the evidence of months of hard work and determination. And now here you are, doing exactly what he would have done, helping people, giving them shelter, making his vision real. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper yellowed with age. I found this in my files when I heard about what you girls were doing up here. Thought you might want to have it. I unfolded the paper carefully. It was a certificate, official looking, bearing the seal of the United States Army Corps of Engineers. Certificate of Appreciation, I read aloud. Awarded to Harlan Mercer for outstanding contribution to Project Northern Shield. His dedication and craftsmanship have ensured that this facility will serve its purpose for generations to come. He saved that certificate his whole life, Virgil said. I think he always knew that this place would matter, that it would make a difference someday. I looked at the certificate, at my grandfather's name printed in official government type, at the proof that he had been part of something larger than himself, something that was now finally fulfilling its purpose. Thank you, I said to Virgil. Thank you for bringing this to us. He smiled again, that warm smile that seemed to defy his age and the cold and everything else. Thank your grandfather. He is the one who built it, day 19. The storm finally broke. I did not notice at first. The wind had been a constant presence for so long that its absence felt strange, like a sound you have grown so accustomed to that you only notice it when it stops. But when I opened the bunker entrance that morning, I found myself looking at clear blue sky for the first time in almost 3 weeks. The world outside was transformed. Snow lay in drifts 10 feet deep in places, sculpted by the wind into shapes that looked almost intentional, almost artistic, like some giant hand had been molding the landscape while we huddled underground. Trees were half buried. The path we had cleared so carefully was completely gone, replaced by a smooth white blanket that sparkled in the morning sun. It was beautiful, and it was devastating, but we had survived. Wren came to stand beside me, her breath forming clouds in the cold morning air. It is over. Yeah, I put my arm around her shoulders. It is over. The power came back 3 days later. Crews from across the state had been working around the clock, braving conditions that would have been dangerous even in good weather. Slowly, section by section, Hadley Creek returned to something like normal. People began to emerge from their homes, digging out from under the snow, checking on neighbors, assessing the damage. Roads were plowed, the grocery store reopened. Life resumed its familiar patterns. But something had changed. No one called us moles anymore. Bo and Tate arrived at the bunker with a truck bed full of lumber and supplies. For the additions, he explained gruffly. Not meeting my eyes. You will want to expand before next winter. I looked at the lumber, at the tools, at the supplies that must have cost him a significant portion of his savings. You do not have to, I know. He finally looked at me, his weathered face unreadable. But I want to. Others followed. The hardware store owner brought tools, a complete set of hand tools and power tools that would have taken us years to accumulate on our own. The woman from the grocery store brought food, canned goods, and dried staples. Enough to restock our depleted reserves several times over. Someone donated a generator, twice as powerful as our old one, capable of running for days on a single tank of fuel. The people who had laughed at us were now helping us. The community that had dismissed us as foolish children living in a hole had seen what that hole could do, and they had decided that maybe, just maybe, we belonged here after all. Spring came slowly to Montana. The snow melted inch by inch, revealing ground we had not seen in months. Brown at first, then green as life began to stir beneath the surface. Streams swelled with runoff, water rushing down from the mountains in torrents that carved new channels through the forest. Birds returned, their songs filling the air with music we had almost forgotten existed. The world woke up from its frozen sleep and began to breathe again. I spent the first warm day standing on the hillside above the bunker, looking out at the valley below. The trees were beginning to bud, their branches tipped with the pale green of new growth, the promise of summer hidden in every leaf. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear water running over rocks, a stream that had been silent all winter, now singing its way down to the valley floor. Wren climbed up to stand beside me. I filed the paperwork today, I told her, with the county for the emergency shelter designation. Yeah, Nadine said it should be approved by summer. We will be official. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the valley awaken below us. Do you think he knows? Wren asked eventually. Grandpa, do you think he knows we found this place? I thought about the letters, about the decades of hoping and waiting, about a man who had built a shelter for grandchildren he had never met, trusting that somehow, someday, they would find their way home. I think he always knew, I said. I think that is why he built it. Wren leaned against me, the way she had so many times before, but this time there was no fear in her posture, no uncertainty, just peace, she said. I have been thinking about school. School, the word felt strange in my mouth, foreign, like something from a different life. There is a community college in Hadley Creek. Nadine told me about it. They have programs for people like us, GED completion, maybe even some college credits. I turned to look at her, surprised. My little sister, who had spent the last year digging tunnels and hauling firewood and managing refugee logistics, who had grown up faster than any 14-year-old should have to. She was thinking about education, about the future, about something beyond just survival. What would you study? She shrugged. But there was a light in her eyes I had not seen before. Engineering, maybe. Someone needs to understand how this place works, how to make it better, how to build more places like it. I smiled. Our grandfather would have liked that. Yeah, she agreed. I think he would have. We stood on that hillside as the sun began to set, the sky turning gold and pink and purple, colors I had almost forgotten existed during the long gray months of winter. The bunker entrance was visible below us, standing open to let in the fresh spring air, welcoming whatever might come next. $7 and a handful of coordinates. That was all it had taken to change everything. Not the money, really. The money was just paper. What mattered was what we had built with it, what our grandfather had built before us, and what we would continue building long after the snow melted and spring returned to Montana. Cora, Wren said softly. Yeah, do you think Mom knew that this is where we would end up? I thought about the envelope, about the coordinates written in my mother's careful handwriting, about the way she had looked at me when she pressed it into my hands 3 days before she died. I think she hoped, I said finally. I think hoping was all she could do. Wren nodded slowly. Then we made her hope come true. Yeah, I put my arm around my sister's shoulders, pulling her close. I think we did. The last light faded from the sky, but we did not move. We stood there in the gathering darkness. Two sisters who had been thrown out with nothing and had built everything. Two orphans who had found family in letters never sent and a bunker built by hands they had never held. Two young women who had finally, after everything, come home. The bunker waited below us, solid and patient and ours. But it was not just a shelter anymore. It was a foundation, a starting point, the first chapter of a story that was only beginning. And for the first time in our lives, no one could tell us to leave. I looked up at the sky and the stars were coming out, thousands of them, millions of them, scattered across the darkness like diamonds on black velvet. The night we were thrown out, there were no stars. I remembered that detail more than anything else. But tonight, the sky was full of them. And somewhere up there, among all those points of light, I like to think my mother was watching. I like to think my grandfather was watching too, looking down at the shelter he had built, at the grandchildren who had finally found it, at the legacy that had survived decades of waiting and silence and hope. We did it, I whispered into the darkness. We found it. We built on it. We used it the way you wanted. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the smell of pine and new growth and possibility. It almost sounded like an answer. Wren looked up at me, ready to go back in. Not yet, I said. Let us stay a little longer. So we stayed, two sisters on a hillside in Montana, looking at the stars, surrounded by the land that had always been waiting for them. Home, finally truly impossibly home.